Dear church, let's talk about senior Christians in the church. Hello and welcome to the Dear Church podcast. I'm your host, Chris McCurley, joined by my guest today, Steve Baggett, who is one of my co-workers, friend, mentor in a lot of ways. Steve was actually the minister here for 17 years, is that right?
Preaching minister for 17, been here altogether 22.
Been here 22, so preaching minister for 17, decided that on your own, you're going to kind of, semi-retire, I guess, to some degree and stay on staff. And I know that was invaluable because transitioning to a new minister and everything, you were the glue that held it all together. And so,
well, I don't know about the glue, but I've enjoyed being here.
Well, I think everybody would say this guy has held us together well. And so now you're the associate minister here, and I get the pleasure of working with you on a regular basis, and that's been awesome. And recently, you have started up a seniors ministry. And so when we talk about seniors in the church, we're not talking about high school seniors or college seniors. We're talking about who we would consider, I guess, senior citizens. I hope that's not a term that anybody's offended by, but are older, more mature Christians in the church. Some churches call them golden agers, whatever you want to designate. We call them young at heart here. And we had several of the members of that group offer some really clever names. You allowed them to pick the names. And, somebody said the Over the Hill group, or, I don't remember all the other, proposals that were thrown out there. But and that's been going well because I believe, now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've always felt like maybe the most neglected group in a church is often the seniors, because I think it's natural to focus on young families coming in. We want young families, we want youth, because that means the future of the church is bright. And so we kind of cater things or tailor things to the younger generations. And then we also, in putting together lessons or things like that, may think, well, they know all this stuff, so we don't have to worry about them. And it seems that, they can very easily feel like that they're neglected. And so I feel like that this is a very needed ministry in all of our churches, but I'm very excited about what it's doing here. And we've had almost 200 in participation in a lot of the events already.
Yeah, I'm excited about it as well. Several years ago, one of our deacons ran a seniors ministry, and it went really well. Ray Barker was the one who led that ministry. They did a lot of amazing things, but health and other issues just required that he step down for a while. And for a few years, we've not had any particular ministry for seniors. And so the elders asked that we get this started. Interestingly, we have on our membership roll, I think it's like 320 people that would fit in the 60-degree age and up. So I remember the first time I sent a mass email out, people began to ask, well, what am I getting this email for? And then they would think, oh, I am 60.
We're always the last of the party when it comes to recognizing our age, right?
That's right. So we started the ministry a while back, and I think you were there for this. We had just a general potluck, add-a-dish meal as we kicked things off, and it was amazing. We learned that day that when we have meals at the church, most of the time the majority of the food comes from our seniors, because you'll remember, I've never seen so much food that day. But we had a great lunch, spent a good bit of time together just talking about what we hope to accomplish, and spending some time in the Word. And people just seem to be really, really excited. In fact, several have talked about so thankful that this is starting back up.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing, not just at Walnut Street, but in all the churches that do this. I've always felt like, on Sunday morning when we welcome our visitors, you often have somebody stand up, and I think this is a good thing. I'm not disparaging this. You'll often have somebody stand up and say, we want to thank you for being here this morning, and we especially want to welcome our visitors. Yes. You are our honored guest, and we are so glad that you're here. Stick around, let's get a chance to meet you. All that's fine and good.
Sure.
But what about if we emphasized, we're really excited that our members are here. We're really thankful for our core people who are here because they make us, right? And oftentimes it's that seniors group that is the core, the people who are here every time, the people who contribute the most, whether it be financially or through serving or whatever it is. And I think oftentimes we get focused in other directions, like I said a while ago. It's not bad, but we sometimes can forget about our seniors. And so that first meeting with our folks, which, like you said, we were in no danger of running out of food, but not only was it good food, but it was good fellowship. Right. And you presented a lesson that day, which is the whole reason why I wanted to have you on to talk about this, because I thought it was fantastic. And you talked about how it might be maybe the temptation of some when they reach a certain age to quote unquote retire from service in the church.
Right.
And you phrased it much more eloquently than I am right now, but you talked about how you never really retire from the work of the church. Yes. Talk a little bit about what you said that day that I thought was just so good.
Okay, I'd be glad to. First of all, I happened to think this morning as I was just thinking about this podcast about Proverbs 16:31. Mm-hmm. The silver-haired head is a crown of glory if it is found in the way of righteousness. Yeah. I love that passage because as you said, I think so many times those who get up in years and fit in that senior group tend to think, well, I've worked hard all of my life. I'm not going to quit the church in any way, but it's time for someone else now to take over. Yeah. And I think there's just so much that we can learn from people who are in those senior years. And the message you're talking about came from Joshua chapter 14. And it's just an amazing passage of Scripture. And if it's okay, I'm actually going to read some of that as we go through today. Starting in Joshua 14, verse 6, Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, said to Moses, said to him, you know the word which the Lord said to Moses, the man of God concerning you and me in Kadesh. Caleb was one of those 2 spies who came back with a very positive report. 10 had come back. They said, the land is just exactly like God said it is. Here's some fruit, and it was amazing. But they said, it's full of giants, and they said, there's no way we can take that land. Right. And so in Joshua 14, he talks about that. He said, I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me to Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. I brought back word to him as it was in my heart. But he said, nevertheless, my brethren who went up with me made the heart of the people melt, and I felt, but I wholly followed the Lord. So he was reminding Joshua here that I did just exactly what God asked me to do. Yeah. And God recognized that. And then there's an interesting passage that for so long I think I had just missed as it follows here. He says in verse 9, Moses swore on that day, saying, surely the land where your foot has trodden shall be your inheritance, and your children's forever, because you've wholly followed the Lord my God. And so God made a promise to him that day. When you all get there, this very land is going to be yours. Yep. And so he continues, he says, behold, the Lord's kept me alive. As he said, these 45 years, ever since the Lord spoke the word to Moses, pardon me, while Israel wandered in the wilderness, and they said, here I am this day, 85 years old. Mm-hmm. Now, he was a man who could have taken it easy at that point. He had served the Lord, his own words, I've wholly followed the Lord. I did exactly what he asked me to do. He's promised me this land, but I'm 85 years old now, and I don't know that I can go in. I'm just going to take it easy right here. But that is exactly the opposite of what he did. He said, I am as strong this day as on the day that Moses sent me. Just as my strength was then, so now is my strength for war, both going out and for coming in. Yeah. Man, he had a lot of confidence. And I don't think it was an arrogant confidence at all. So I'm just as strong today as I was then. Not many of us can say that.
No, he had some swagger though, didn't he?
He did. But then I love this passage. Now, therefore, give me this mountain of which the Lord spoke. Yeah. He said, okay, God's plan has come to fruition. We're here. Yeah. And you remember what God told me. He said, even though I'm 85 years old, you give me this mountain, because that's what God promised. And of course he did. And Caleb went in and conquered that land at 85 years old.
Yep.
And it's just a great lesson about if our hearts, if we wholly follow the Lord, like he talked about, age doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Now, there will come a time, obviously, when physically we can't do as much.
Yeah.
But, man, we can serve the Lord right up until the very end.
Absolutely. And I think that we need to define service, because I think all too often we sort of see service as something grandiose, something that requires a lot of time and effort and money and all those kind of things. The biggest impact possible, when there are people that I know here at Walnut Street that have been almost on their deathbed, bedridden,
right,
that have asked, who can I pray for?
Exactly.
Bring me a bulletin, bring me the care line, which is our daily update that we send out through email of people who are in need. And let me pray for those people. I can at least do that, right?
Exactly.
So there's always something you do. It reminds me of the former backup quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. His name was John Brody, and he never got to play. He was in the NFL, played for the 49ers, never got to play. His only job that he had on the team was to hold the ball for the kicker on field goals. And somebody asked him one time, said, how does it feel to be resigned to just holding the football? Does it feel like you have nothing to do? And he said, well, if I don't do that, the ball's going to fall over. So he felt like there was still something. He had a part and a place in this team. And that's what you're saying. And I hope that our seniors that are watching or listening to this understand that you're not an addendum. This is not, in your later years, just an add-on. You're still an active part of what we do here. 1 Corinthians 12, Romans 12, you still have a place as a functioning member of this body, even if it's simply praying from your bed.
Right.
There's stuff to do.
At our second meeting, we had several opportunities for people to volunteer to do the very kinds of things you're talking about. Several people signed up and said, I would love to be on the group that just sends notes of encouragement to people.
Yeah.
We have a praying ministry, and we'll send out emails to this group of people to pray for this family. We had a family who lost a loved one just last night, and we can send out a message about that and pray for them specifically today. We have a group of people who have volunteered, not as large a group, but some who volunteered to provide transportation to doctor's appointments and those kinds of things. And so there's so many things that senior members can do because of their place in life, because they have more time and are available. I'm amazed when you think about it. Of course, people lived a lot longer in the Old Testament, as we know, but Noah, best estimates, was 500 years old when you built the ark.
Yeah. That's pretty old.
That's pretty old. Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born.
Right.
Caleb, as we said, was 85 years old. Elizabeth was probably in her 80s when John was born.
Yeah.
So yes, it was a different time during those days. People did live longer, but I think the point is, regardless of whether you're this may sound sort of crazy, a young old person or an old person, there's just so much that we can do. And, we're, as you said, we're trying to really attract a lot of younger people in the church, which I think is a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Sure.
Those younger people need these older people. Yeah. So, I think I read somewhere in Scripture about the older women teaching the younger women.
You did,
yeah.
Yes. There's a mentoring that goes on there.
Right.
And I know that that's a reason why you and our youth minister, Kyle, have talked about some intergenerational things, getting together and fusing those two groups, because it's important, and Kyle believes this to be true, that our young people learn from our older people.
Exactly.
And maybe at this age, they're kind of rolling their eyes like, why are we doing this? But there's a lot of people in that seniors group, that Young at Heart group, that have a lot to offer in the way of just life lessons and and they've lived a hard life, a good life, but a lot that they can share with our young people, right?
Yeah, we have Kyle is part of our youth group is part of a monthly area-wide youth service.
Yeah.
And so we're going to host that in a few weeks. And Kyle and I have talked, our Young at Heart group is going to be the primary group that provides the food for the young people after the worship and give them an opportunity to interact with the young folks. Mm-hmm. And then we have plans for some just mentoring opportunities where we'll for example, we may send 2 or 3 of our youth group ladies to the house of a lady who's just an excellent cook and let her teach them how to bake a pie or do whatever and just show them how she operates in the kitchen. Just some very practical things. Yeah. We have several guys who are really good woodworkers. Mm-hmm. And so maybe we'll send 2 or 3 of our guys over and let them talk about the woodworking process. We have some really great mechanics. And so just providing opportunities where our seniors have developed some really good skill sets and sharing that with those who are younger. Practical, how to live on a daily basis kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's so beneficial for the young people, but it's also beneficial for those who are doing the mentoring, because I have been told many times over by senior adults in the church that, I've retired from my job. I'm getting older. I can't do the things that I used to do, and I'm really struggling to find mm-hmm. my purpose and where I fit. And I think that this is a great way to kind of say, okay, let us help you find that. I had a woman many years ago who was 99, and she had overstayed her welcome, she thought, on this earth, and she was ready to go. And she told me one time, she said, Chris, I don't know why God's keeping me alive. Mm-hmm. And I very politely said, well, it's probably going to be a good idea to figure that out, mm-hmm. Because you're still here. And if you're still here, there's probably something that he has for you to do. Absolutely. May seem minuscule, may be tiny to you, but something that he has for you to get done, right?
Right. One of the things that came out in that first meeting that we had, along the line of what we're talking about right now, is several of our senior members said, I don't know our young people.
Yeah.
And I would like to have an opportunity, some kind of interaction where I can get to know them and they can get to know me. And one of the things that they talked about, which we're definitely going to do, is a Bible study time with both seniors and youth group. Just come together with the text open and give our young people an opportunity to see these people who are seniors and so much older than them, thirsty for the Word. Yeah. And to hear their comments, as well as the older people getting to hear what some of the younger people say. I think that would be just an amazing thing.
I think so too. And I think what I have noticed, not always, not across the board, but in a lot of churches, you have those two groups that are worlds apart, because the younger group thinks, well, they don't have anything to offer me. They're old and out of touch. And the older group perhaps thinks, well, they don't have anything that they can learn from me because they're just, they're selfish and self-centered because they're younger and all that. And they got this cynicism on both sides, right? And I think it's awesome to bridge that gap. Like I said, I don't think that's across the board, but I've noticed that some. Right. And so to draw those two groups together that kind of are almost opposites, mm-hmm. to bring them together and say, hey, we're all on the same team here fighting for the same goal. Exactly. And I love what it says about Caleb there, wholly follow the Lord. Holy. The connotation there refers to a hunter closing in on his prey. Mm-hmm. And Caleb was trying to close the gap between him and God. He wanted to be hot on his heels.
Right.
And we have a lot of great folks here that have lived their lives that way. And I think we could benefit learning from them and trying to, take some lessons from them on how to do that as well.
Right. You and I both have had the privilege of serving other congregations in addition to Walnut Street. And everywhere I've been, the church is just so blessed by the wisdom of age. And sometimes in our quest to focus on a younger mindset, because we all know that if we don't continue to grow and bring in younger people, then the church is going to shrink over time. And we don't want that to happen, obviously.
Right.
But sometimes I think there's at least a temptation I've seen in the past when we're really going after that younger mindset, for the older group to feel like, even though I think it's unwarranted, that they're just being ignored and overlooked. And I'm just so grateful that that's not the mindset here.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And I we talk about the things that they can do and the ways that they can serve, but I think it's important, and I know you focused on this as well, I think it's important to, like, we can just be together. Mm-hmm. There doesn't have to be a spiritual component necessarily, although we're all members of the Lord's body when we're together. There doesn't always have to be a singing or a devo or anything. We just want to be together. I know y'all are loading up, and there's a pretty popular establishment in Kentucky about 2 hours from here called Patty's, and I know y'all are heading that direction and just doing some things just to be together, right. Foster relationships, and just have fun, right?
That's right. This group knows how to have fun.
They don't have to be taught.
They don't have to be taught, but just to give them the opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think a lot about, though Paul was not as old as some of us, I don't think, at this time, but he took Timothy as his he became his son in the faith, and Paul mentored him for years, just loved him, encouraged him, was there for him, wrote to him. And I think that kind of relationship can be just a tremendous blessing. If we can foster the opportunity for some of our senior folks to adopt some of our younger group and just mentor them and love them, I don't know of a much better situation to help the church be healthy and growing than those intergenerational relationships.
Yeah, I've often said, like when we do the lead camp here at Walnut Street, and we train the young men for leadership, and our young ladies too. But when I'm working with the young men and preaching and things like that, it culminates in them on a Wednesday night standing up and delivering their lesson to the congregation. And there's inevitably someone who'll come up to me and say, well, you better watch it. They're going to take your job.
I've heard that a time or two.
Yeah, and I always respond with, that's exactly what we're trying to do here.
Yes.
We want them to take my job.
Right.
And it's like, eventually you're going to pass the baton.
Sure.
And somebody is going to have to fill that gap. Somebody had to fill the gap for Marshall Keeble and Jimmy Jividan and Guy Woods and these guys that came before us, Marley Conley. And so somebody's going to have to fill your shoes. They're going to have to fill my shoes and to keep this going. And so I want to do something here as we close. I want to give some advice to people my age and younger on how to relate to our seniors and how to help bridge that gap. And then I want you to give some advice to, maybe some seniors that are watching or listening on what they can do. And my thinking is, for folks that are my age and younger, in order to bridge that gap, to be humble enough to say, I've got some things to learn. I use myself as an example. I came in here a year ago to Walnut Street, and you are the established minister who preached here for 17 years, been on staff for 23, and really, like I said earlier, held things together when we were in flux, trying to hire staff and all that. Why would I not take advantage of that wealth of wisdom and knowledge, not just biblically, sound biblical knowledge like you have, but just knowledge of the congregation? I'm coming in and I don't know anybody. I don't know anything about the community, about the church, other than the research I did before I got here. It behooved me to be humble enough to say, what, set your pride aside, so you're the preaching minister here. Who cares? You've got a lot to learn and a lot that you can learn from Steve. And I think telling our folks that are a little younger in the congregation, hey, look to maybe find one or two or more in the congregation that you can pick out and say, I respect that person. I want to learn from them, because a lot of these folks have lived a really tough life at times. They've experienced loss. They've experienced suffering. from some sort of physical illness, perhaps. They've got a lot of life experience that they can pass along. And I think picking out somebody in the congregation that you can learn from and also be humble enough to say, hey, teach me your ways. Help me to be a better Christian.
As you were saying that, I was thinking about when Pam and I moved here, the very same week we arrived here, another couple older than we, Linwood and Vonette Smith, moved and became a part of Walnut Street's family. Linwood was probably the best senior citizen at learning the names of all of our youth. I mean, within just a couple of weeks, it seemed like he knew all of our kids, small through high school, by first name, and he would go up, sometimes if I have trouble remembering a name, and as you know, that happens occasionally, I lean on, hey buddy, or hey friend, that was not a Linwood. I mean, he would call those kids by name. He'd reach out and he'd shake their hands, and they adored him. He's now moved away to be with family, obviously, to care for him. But I think one of the things that those who are older can do is to learn that lesson.
Absolutely. As
we get older, we have to really work to maintain a sharp memory.
Yes.
And that's one thing that will help us to do that. But it communicates. If an older person walks up to a little girl and says, well, Susie, how are you today? It's almost like, first of all, how did you know my name?
Yeah.
But then I think it has that message that eventually over time sinks in, that he really values me. He knows me, and I matter. For Paul to be able to mentor Timothy had to receive that.
Yeah.
And so it comes from both directions. So I would say to those who are older, make it a priority to get to know our youth, and not just our youth, but those young adults of our family and middle-aged adults. Get to know them, call them by name, and be intentional on spending time with them. I think it'll be such a tremendous blessing.
Absolutely. I think so too. And I think, we're all going to be in heaven together someday.
Yes.
Why not try to create our own little piece of heaven right here on earth by looking out for one another, getting to know one another, drawing closer together. I love the concept. I'm so glad that you're heading up that ministry. Yes. I want to tell our viewers and our listeners that if you have a question about today's podcast, you can email me at chris.mccurley@rippleoflight.com. If you have a question specifically for Steve, we'll make sure that we forward it along to him, and I'm sure he'd be glad to respond.
Absolutely.
To you. And we're just thankful for this discussion. Thanks for being on, Steve.
Thanks for the opportunity.
It's just a pleasure to work with you, and I'm glad I'm here.
Same here.
Yeah.
Yes.
And thank you all for tuning in. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Sincerely, Chris.